remember the first time that I saw someone who was Amish at a McDonald's. I'm not kidding you. I was down at Riley Children's Hospital with my daughter. The whole family was down there, and there's a McDonald's right there at Riley's. And I had never seen this before. I'm looking around, and I see a whole bunch of Amish families. Now, you know there's an Amish family because they dress so very differently than everyone else in the place. And I got to be honest with you, I was really surprised. And the theological geek in me wanted to just go over to them and just ask one of the dads, like, what's that struggle like to kind of live out your faith in such a way that really seems foreign to the rest of us? And I know I have a lot of respect for what they do. I know that they struggle with this whole idea and this teaching of Jesus that we're in this world, right? We're still around other people. Some of them don't believe in what we believe in. But we're actually not to be like part of this world in terms of joining in with its sinfulness, right? So I'm God's child, but I'm still I'm not in heaven yet, right? We're not there. And so what the Amish try to do is, I think, one of two main moves when you struggle with your faith. There's these two sides. There's the one side is to retreat, to withdraw, to kind of say, we're going to leave the world. We're going to kind of go to the monastery and be like a monk, and I'm going to get away from anything that might tarnish me or cause me a problem. And so the Amish really try to do that seriously. So they take the not of this world part real seriously. But maybe what they really maybe struggle with is the being in the world part. The connecting with the world, the being a light to the world part. How can I be a light to the world when the world can't see me? When the world, you know what I mean? And I think it's kind of cool when they come to a McDonald's. Well, they're kind of showing the world that they're a little different. They're kind of coming out of their community and going down there. And I wonder how much of a struggle that is, because if anything represents our world, and it's McDonald's, doesn't it? You know you're not in heaven, and you know you're not like in a real godly place when you hit McDonald's. I'm not that McDonald's is godless, but it's all about commercial. It's all about, right, this world. And the other extreme, though, is not a withdrawal, but it's a dive right in. Don't make any difference between me and the world. And I think both are extremes, and both only look at one side of what Jesus was talking about. And what God really wants for us. He wants us to be His kids. He wants us to live because we've been forgiven. He wants us to live as born-again believers in Him. That's who we are. We stand out. We are different, regardless of how we dress, right? My daughter doesn't have to wear a bonnet or something to show that she's not from here, that she's a child of God, right? Born from above. That's who she is. That's who I am. That's who my wife is and my kids are. And that doesn't require a certain dress code, does it? It doesn't require me. I'm just so thankful that I have to give up electricity. I don't know what I would do. Right? I wouldn't be able to do what we just did. Right? We'd have to, go acoustic, and that would be okay. But I don't want to do that on a regular basis. I need my iPod. I need my iPad. I need my, you know what I mean? I need my endless list of electronic devices. I love that. But I got to also realize that maybe there's a point where I worship those things. And I got to watch, and I got to sort of say, okay, I'm in this world, I'm part of it. I'm to honor, right, the authorities in this world, but I'm also not of this world. I'm not from here. My citizenship, as Peter says, is in heaven. I'm awaiting Jesus Christ to come and take me home from that place. That's really who I am. And I think there's a great example in chapter 18 that we're in the story this week with Daniel. Daniel kind of gives us what it might look like for someone to kind of do both of these things, to have that kind of balance, right? Because if you look at, and I invite you to turn to Daniel, we're going to begin really in chapter 6. Not chapter 6, I'm sorry. At the very beginning of the book there. Basically what happens is, as we talked about last week and the weeks to come, and in the previous weeks, Assyria had come in, right, taken care of the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom of Judah fell to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And people were taken captive. They were taken to Babylon. And it says that there were some in Judah, in verse 6, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And they were given new names. Daniel, got Belteshazzar, great name. Hananiah got Shadrach, we got Meshach and Abednego. That's where these guys come from. These are Jewish guys. And they are going to be groomed to work for the king of Babylon, the very king who had taken them captive, destroyed their land, and ripped them from that place. And now they are going to work for him. They learned the language, they learned the literature of the Babylonians. In fact, one commentator said that these guys were probably more Babylonian than some of the Babylonians, because they knew all things Babylonian. And they were going to work for the king. And again, think about this. If you're a withdraw kind of guy, we got to get away from the world, being groomed to work for the king of Babylon is kind of like asking Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory to lie about something. Right? You know how he is? Have you ever seen that show? When he has to lie, he doesn't lie. Or when he is like cut off, when he is trying to tell you about something, he freaks out and he starts twitching and he just can't handle it anymore. And so if you're a withdraw kind of person, you're going to react that way. You're going to be just like, you just won't be able to handle it. Because he's having to balance and be really courageous in the face of because in the face of some things that are not going to be in line with how he's been raised, with how he knows he has to live. So food is going to be an issue. Jewish have certain dietary laws. And I think it's cool because what he does is Daniel doesn't say, you know what, I'm not going to do any of this. I resist all of this. I think Daniel kind of realizes in some way that God is going to use him to glorify himself. That God's going to be glorified in all of this, in a situation that doesn't make any sense. And it begins with food. And he says, look, he's not going to defile himself with the royal food and wine. So he kind of draws the line there. And as we live in the world, we got to realize, folks, that there's going to be a line. There are going to be some non-negotiables, some things that we're going to have to say, not going to do it. Some people aren't going to like me for it. Some people are going to think I'm weird, but I'm going to have to draw the line here. And for him, it was food at first. And again, the guy who was taking care of him, who was kind of training him, said, wait a second. If you guys start to wither because you're not eating right, I'm going to get in a whole lot of trouble. In fact, they're going to take my head off if this happens. So Daniel says, look, give me 10 days. We'll do our veggies. Your guys eat the food that you eat, right, which was kind of probably pretty lavish types of food. In other words, you guys, you can all get gout, and my guys will be like healthy and all, like, we'll be in good shape after 10 days. And that's exactly what happens. 10 days, these guys are healthier than the other guys. And so they kind of win the respect of these people. And it says that he was actually able to understand literature. He was understand all kinds of learning. He could understand visions. He can understand dreams. And these guys are kind of 10 times better, it says, than all the magicians and enchanters in the whole kingdom. So things were very good. And in fact, he interprets a dream for Nebuchadnezzar. But then the test comes. Nebuchadnezzar, in chapter 3, we're going to jump to there, he makes an image of gold. Now this thing is 90 feet tall. Okay, that's big. And 9 feet wide. That is gigantic. And he summons all these guys, right? All these officials, and they're going to dedicate this big thing. And he has the herald proclaim this. He says in verse 4, O peoples, nations, men of every language, when you hear the sound of, right, when I strike up the band, horn, flutes, zither, well, they have zither, lyre, harp, pipes, all kinds of music, you got to fall down, worship this gold image that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever doesn't will be thrown into a blazing furnace. Now, guess who didn't do it? Our guy Daniel, right? And his guys. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they do not obey. In fact, the astrologers, for whom they were 10 times better than, maybe there's a little jealousy there, they're like, wait a second. Those guys who came out of the exile from Judah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they are not playing, right? You stuck up the band, they're not dancing, right? They're not bowing down, they're not worshiping this, and so you made a decree, they need to burn. And so Nebuchadnezzar has them come in and says, all right, okay, if you guys do that, if you bow down, you're good. But if you don't, I'm going to put you in the furnace. And then he says, what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? So they say to the king, and these are really cool words in verse 16 of chapter 3 of Daniel. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it." Could you imagine that? This guy has no problem throwing you into the furnace. He's mad. You've defied him. And he's saying, look, we're not even going to justify this. We're not arguing with you. So in a sense, they're kind of being disrespectful. They're saying, you're the king, but sorry, king, with all due respect, right? Maybe this is the word they're using here. Our God's able to save us from your hand, O king. And even if he doesn't, think of this, look at this in verse 18. Even if God doesn't save us, we want you to know, king, mark it down. Make sure you make note of this, that we will not serve your gods. We will not worship the image of gold that you have set up. There's the line. There's the non-negotiable. There's the thing. Put a gun to our head. Throw us in the furnace. We're not going to do it. In our lives as Christians, there's got this worship of God and God alone. It needs to be our non-negotiable. Again, that doesn't have to do with clothing and other things. It doesn't have to do with musical style. It doesn't have to do with all the things that we kind of think are the line. The line is, I'm not going to worship that. I'm not going to worship money. I'm not going to worship pleasure. I'm not going to worship power. I'm not going to worship these things. I'm going to worship God and God alone. Put me in the furnace if I do otherwise. Now, and it says in verse 19, his attitude toward them changed, and he ordered the servants, he said, crank it up, boys, 7 times hotter than usual. Can you imagine that? I mean, it's hot enough to burn you, like vaporize you. He says, crank it up. In fact, it was so hot that the soldiers tied them up, right? They found the biggest, baddest soldiers, had them tie them up, and those guys burned up as they were taking them to the furnace and throwing them in. That's how hot it was. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego get thrown into the fire. They're down there. One of his officials goes, wait a second, how many did you throw in? He's like, well, Shadrach, Meshach, with 3. He's like, wait a second, there's 4 of them, and they're not tied up anymore. And they're walking around, and he sees them down there. And he says, look, I see 4. They're unbound, they're unharmed. The 4th looks like a son of the gods in verse 25. And Nebuchadnezzar, he goes to the opening of this furnace. He says, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. Something has changed. He's saying that they're sons of the Most High God. So they come out of the fire, and what's amazing is that not a hair on their heads was singed, their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. I think that's amazing, isn't it? Every year we have this bonfire for right around Halloween. And none of us are in the fire, but don't you go home and what do you smell like? You smell like a forest fire, right? I mean, you got smoke, got that, and it takes a while to get that smell out. These guys were in the fire, in this incredibly hot, like a nuclear furnace, man, and there's not even a smell of fire on them. Now listen to what Nebuchadnezzar says, and this is, I think, one of the huge things. This is God's goal here. That this man who attacked God's people and has enslaved them in a lot of ways says these words, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This guy's praising God. He sent his angel, rescued his servants. They trusted in him, and they defied the king's command. Who's the king? He's the king. He's going, look, they defied me. They would rather give up their lives than serve or worship any god except their own God. So here's a new decree. People of any nation, language, who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. When he was throwing him into the furnace, he was talking trash, wasn't he? Yeah, I wonder if your God can save you, buddy. Yeah, how's it going to feel now when you defy me, the mighty one who makes these incredible proclamations and has 90-foot gold statues? It's gold, okay, folks? Huge. This guy's saying, I've got power, I've got arrogance. And now his tune has changed as he comes face to face with God and his people. And so it's amazing. But what happens is Nebuchadnezzar dies, and there's a new king in chapter 6 as we go. And this is the last one I want to talk about in Daniel. a guy named Darius. And Darius likes Daniel as well. In fact, he likes him so much that he puts him as one of 3 administrators who are over like 120. They call them satraps, but they're kind of like local government officials. And he's one of the 3. In fact, he is getting ready to make Daniel like king, like ruler of the kingdom. He's going to say, look, Daniel, I'm the king, but you're like Joseph with Pharaoh. You're going to take over everything. Now, how do you think that sat with the other 128? Who are Babylonians? What, this Jewish dude's going to come in here? He's in exile. He's one of our prisoners of war. Darius, don't you get it? How can he? So they look for a way to find something against him. But Daniel's pretty bulletproof. Daniel loves God. Daniel serves God. Daniel's God's guy. Daniel just, and it's not a pride thing. I think it's amazing. That's the coolest thing about Daniel is he's not prideful about it. He does things quietly. He does things just, this is who he is. And so what they do is they trick these 120 satraps. They trick the king into making a decree that, and it's in verse 7 of chapter 6. Anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, he gets thrown in the lion's den. Now here's a guy who is more than willing to have people worship him and pray to him as a god, correct? Makes this law. He goes right along with it. Okay, the decree's issued. Right? When the king speaks, it's the way it is. Daniel goes into and starts praying. He falls on his knees. It says 3 times a day. He got down on his knees. He prayed. He gave thanks to God in verse 10. Just as he had always done. He didn't stop doing it. And he's with his guys. And they're there and they're praying. And these leaders, they see this and they're like, uh-oh, Daniel's not following the rule. He's praying to another god. Now, Darius likes these guys. He likes Daniel. And he really would like to get him out of it. But they got him trapped. An edict's an edict, dude. Rule's a rule. Law's a law. You signed off on this. You can't change it. So his hands are tied. He has to throw Daniel into the lions. And so he does. And look at what he says as he sends him there. Very different than Nebuchadnezzar was. In verse 16, as he was throwing him in there and gives the order, he says, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. He's kind of counting on God to be real in this instance. I don't think he believes in God, but he's seen how this Daniel guy has lived his life. And I got to think it kind of made a difference. And so he throws him in there. The stone is put over there, and the king is just upset. He doesn't eat. He doesn't have any entertainment, right? He skipped HBO that night, and he could not sleep. No, he didn't skip HBO. There was no HBO. But he had he was like, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just upset about this. And the first thing in the morning, he goes out there. And in verse 20, it says he cries out, Daniel, son of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? And Daniel answers. Okay, there's your answer. Hey, O king, live forever. No, just stop right there for a second. He says, O king, you're the one who put me here, but I'm going to still acknowledge you as the king. I'm going to still give you respect. May you live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouth of these lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I done anything wrong before you, O king. He's overjoyed. He lifts him out. He has the guys that falsely accused Daniel brought in. They get thrown to the lions. And then Darius writes to every person, nation, and man of every language throughout the land. He says this, may you prosper greatly. Here's the decree, that all people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. Now this is Darius, the king of Babylon. He says, for he is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs